In June of 1976, I was assigned as a young Army captain to what was to have been a 3-month summer assignment with the National Security Council at the White House. My boss was General Brent Scowcroft, National Security Advisor to President Ford. That 3-month summer internship turned into an 8-year tour at the National Security Council, 5 in uniform and 3 as a political appointee. It was the example of Brent Scowcroft, demonstrating that an individual could continue to serve one's country even after taking off the military uniform, that was the inspiration for the political turn my career took under President Ronald Reagan. It was thus my great pleasure to serve alongside Brent in the President George H.W. Bush administration, first as Undersecretary of State and later as American Ambassador to Germany. From Tiananmen Square to Panama to the Gulf War and culminating in German unification, it was my honor to participate in shaping U.S. foreign policy in those pivotal years of 1989 to 1993. The close working relationship between Brent Scowcroft and my boss, Secretary of State Jim Baker, served well their friend and boss, President Bush 41. It was also a model for those of us working under them to formulate and execute policy in that period of dramatic and historical transition. But Brent will be the first to say that not even he anticipated the dramatic events of November 1989. In fact, when my predecessor in Bonn, Ambassador Dick Walters, said in the early spring of 1989 that he expected Germany to unify during his tour as ambassador, it was Brent Scowcroft who called Dick Walters to suggest that Dick was a bit ahead of American policy at that point. However, it was also Brent Scowcroft who helped President Bush craft his speech in Mainz in May of 1989, calling for Germany and the United States to join as partners in leadership. And it was Brent who helped shape President Bush's public comments, spoken to the New York Times 3 weeks before the wall fell, that the United States had confidence in Germany and would strongly support German unification within NATO. Once the wall fell, Brent was at the president's side, leading the interagency team in Washington and maintaining close contact with Horst Teltschik, his counterpart in Helmut Kohl's chancellery. After leaving office in 1993, Brent continued his engagement with German, American, and transatlantic affairs by joining the board of the American Council on Germany. It would not surprise me, and might even please Brent, if some of you, especially in the younger generation, are learning just tonight of Brent's key role in German unification. But that is characteristic of Brent Scowcroft. Keep your country and your president out front, support them with your decades of experience and wisdom, and measure your selfless service by results and not stories about yourself. Brent, for your decades of service to our country, your dedication to German, American, and transatlantic relations, and your outstanding service to the American Council on Germany, it is my pleasure to present you tonight with our Lifetime Achievement Award. And thank you for agreeing, after some remarks, to engage in a dialogue with Matthias Deffner to both look back and look forward at this important relationship. Would you please join me on the stage?
I am honored and humbled by this award. Honored because I believe in the American Council of Germany and have for a number of years. And I think probably they made a mistake. I'm honored because John Joy McCloy was one of my heroes for beginning the relationship and for beginning what I would call the Atlantic community. And I'm further honored because of my comrade here, who toiled with me brilliantly over decades ago in the NSC system. We're celebrating now the reunification of Germany. And let me say just a few words about that reunification as it was taking place. It's obvious just from that title that when President Bush Sr. came into office, there was a great deal of turmoil in Europe. No question about that. President Bush also had something else that he wanted to make clear. That his administration, and he was newly in office, his administration was not simply a continuation of the Ronald Reagan administration. After all, he had been vice president for 8 years under Ronald Reagan. But was a new adventure. And so we took American foreign policy apart piece by piece and put it back together again to make sure that we had not overlooked anything that we should have looked at. Now that took time, and we fell behind in our relationships. One of the places we fell behind was Germany and what was going on in and between the two Germanys. We also were falling behind in meeting with the Soviet Union, which is usually one of the initial acts of any new administration. So we looked to the latter especially and found out that the Germans were visiting Europe, and this might be a good time to meet with them. We had a particular problem, and that is we used to alternate visits, one place or the other. And we couldn't even agree on who had had the last visit and what it represented. So we had this wonderful notion, since the Russians were going to be in Central Europe, why don't we have it on the island of Malta? Great idea. Neutral place, not favorable to either party. That, of course, turned out to be a disaster. A hurricane, probably the only one ever registered, hit, and we each were pinned down in our own ships and couldn't talk. Anyway, after there was one session with them that we managed to get in, the president offered to go to NATO and debrief on whatever there was to debrief about with the Russians. And he went, and the meeting was held in Germany, and Chancellor Kohl asked President Bush to dinner the night before the NATO meeting had started. It was a small dinner. There were maybe 8 people at the table. And Chancellor Cole spent the entire dinner talking about unification. And I found it marvelous because we had been unable to get any prominent Germans to talk about reunification in a way that would give us the notion of how we could be helpful and not harmful. And I was critical with our ambassador for saying there would be unification because we wanted to be supportive of Germany, and we didn't know what they had in mind. So anyway, we went to dinner with Chancellor Cole, and he spent the entire dinner talking about unifying Germany, how it could be done, what were the pitfalls, what were the opportunities, and so on. And I was thinking as he was talking, well, that's okay because we had not gotten to this review in our own foreign policy, but the president knows what he'll say is, well, I appreciate you explaining all this to me. Let me take it back and study and so on, and then we'll meet together and have another session. So about this time, Chancellor Cole was finishing his remarks, and I was waiting for the president to say exactly what I knew he was going to say. He looked at Chancellor Cole and said, "Go for it." Just like that. And that not only was brilliant for that, but what it represented was this duo at a crucial time in not only German history, but European history and Atlantic community history. This basic sense of trust in each other and in the judgment. And this meeting is not very well known, but it was at this meeting that the unification of Germany started according to a plan by the Prime Minister. I thought you all would enjoy hearing that because it, to me, marks an epitome, and there are several in our relationship between the United States and Germany, where we have operated so closely as to be almost indistinguishable, except in our accents. Thank you very much.